Welcome to another episode of Corporate CPR, where we breathe life back into your organization, projects, and processes, giving you insights to recovery and avoiding corporate mortality events. Joining us today is Stephen Kohler. Stephen is Audira's intuitive founder and CEO, and he's isn't your ordinary executive coach or strategic thinker. He is a University of Chicago MBA trained executive with P&L experience who led global marketing and strategy departments for several blue chip and industry leading brands such as Weber, Kraft, and Shure. Seeking to focus his career more on the people side of the business, where the true power of every organization resides, Stephen founded Audira to help people find clarity, direction, and purpose in their work. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, Jana. So thrilled to be here. It's a true pleasure and honor.
Yeah, thank you. Tell us a little bit about Adira before we get started.
Well, in Latin, the word Audira means to listen. And that relates to your question, as in at Audira, we believe the most powerful foundational leadership skill is listening. And I had the good fortune of having a very long corporate career that I learned a lot. And one of the things that I noticed really kind of separated the top leaders in organizations from those that were still growing was really that individual leaders' ability and willingness to listen and then incorporate what they were hearing from their team members and their customers and all of the ensemble members, so to speak, around them. So at Audira, we really love to enable leaders, teams, and organizations to amplify their listening skills to become stronger leaders.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, definitely one of, I think, the reasons I see a lot of on surveys, the dissatisfiers, because I feel like nobody in the organization is listening. So I can see why that would be very impactful to put an emphasis on that. I think that leads a little bit to what we want to talk about today, which is the post-pandemic, it seems like mass exodus of people leaving organizations, which can be obviously very costly to an organization because it costs so much to bring people in, train them, get that tribal knowledge, things that you can't even just train, you just have to be experienced. And to have all these people leaving the organization can be really crippling. What are your thoughts around this?
Yes, thank you for the question. I would say that, the topic of engagement has always been something, top of mind for a lot of organizations. But I think the one of the outcomes of the pandemic is it really shines a light on how important it is for organizations to truly be listening to their employees. And I think, to be very blunt about it, so many people are leaving because they don't feel heard. Insofar as that they may not feel like they have a strong connection to the organization's mission, vision, values. I mean, in many cases, they may not even know what those are. They don't feel heard, perhaps, from in terms of a work-life balance. They may not feel heard in terms of career development. They may not feel heard in terms of flexibility. And so a lot of employees, of course, are voting with their feet, so to speak. And so, of course, the pandemic has really, I think, made us all slow down and really think about what's important in life. And on the flip side, organizations have recognized that they're able to really, do work from anywhere. So on the one hand, you have organizations saying, hey, we don't care where you are. If you've got the right skills and background, we'd love to have you and we'll hire you. We have other organizations that are unfortunately not retaining their employees from that kind of connection and listening. And so what you have with that is a mass exodus where people are leaving those organizations they don't feel heard by, and then taking a step back and saying, I really want to go and join somebody else that I feel like I'm aligned from a values perspective on.
Yeah, the landscape is really starting to change. And I know as a leader, it can be very difficult to embrace the change, but two, find the most effective ways of working. Us as project managers, we've been often have remote teams that we work with, but there is some value in being in person as well. There's a lot of rapport and trust that's built and some of that even listening, like you talk about. So what are your thoughts about organizations responding to that flexibility? What does flexibility look like, and how do they put the right things in place and balance success of the organization?
Yeah, I love that question. I think one of the first things we have to remind ourselves, Jana, is, early in the pandemic, there was a lot of focus on kind of the where part of flexibility. Are you in the office? Are you not? And I think that's definitely a crucial element. And I think what the best organizations are doing right now is they're putting out engagement surveys and having a lot of listening sessions to identify what does that look like for the employees. How many hours or how many days in the week in the office does that look like, whether you're in or out, and really have the employees be able to kind of choose what that looks like. I think the additional thing is to consider some other elements beyond the where, meaning when do employees want to work, and who are they working with? The more empowerment and flexibility beyond kind of the where, I think, can be really important. So you've got organizations that are helping individuals, co-author when they're working. For example, a lot of organizations are shifting to a 4-day week. You have other organizations that are doing job sharing or time shifting, where 2 employees will actually share the same job or do, part-time things. And so the more options and kind of co-authorship that organizations do with employees, the more likely they're going to be able to attract and retain and keep this talent.
It reminds me a lot of from Daniel Pink's book Drive, about that autonomy of of where to work and building your team and things like that, and how that is how we should be driving our culture these days, instead of the carrot and sticks, because that's not a motivator anymore. So yeah, I like that. Do you feel, though, that people are leaving with a place to go? Are they just quitting without a job, or are these people finding alternatives, do you think? Have you seen any trends in that area?
Yeah, another great question. I think the answer is yes to both. I think what I'm noticing is a lot of individuals are leaving first and foremost to take a step back and take some time, many of whom do not have something waiting, to really say, hey, life is short. I've been reminded of that because of COVID. I really want to take some time to think about what I want next. And so, and I was the beneficiary of this a number of years ago, where I had worked with an executive coach at the tail end of my last season, so to speak, and really realized that I wanted to make a major shift career-wise. And I took several months to do that. And that led to me kind of starting my own business and shifting into people development. So I think, to your question, a number of people are doing something similar, where they're taking some portion of time off. They're really reflecting on, who am I? What's my why? And then being very intentional about what they then go out and seek. So I have a number of clients I work with that make major shifts from maybe a corporate role into a nonprofit role, or from a corporate role to a government role, or something like that. Many people I know actually find themselves in more entrepreneurial roles. I just read an article in the New York Times yesterday that talked about at least half of the individuals polled wanted to be, self-employed in the next 12 months, so that they could be more masters of their own universe. So I think it's a 2-part process for many of us.
Yeah, I loved going out on my own. And the reason one of the things that I like so much about it, whether it's being a consultant or owning a company, was that direct connection between the work I do and the reward I get.
I love that.
Because you can sit at a desk for 40 hours and not produce much value and still get paid for it. And I hated that feeling, or I hated it feeling like, oh my goodness, I have to be tied to my desk, and I really got my job done faster than everybody else. I'd rather get paid for 35 hours and then have that 5 hours to go do something.
Amen.
So yeah, I like that. So there's all these people out there then who have a lot of talent, who obviously, I guess, are building maybe a passion and a new drive, for work. How do we attract those people then?
I think that's another challenge that a lot of organizations I know I'm speaking to are experiencing, which is, how do we meet them where they are? And then how do we craft a message? This brings up a big theme that I think a lot of employers are struggling with, which is what we call the employer value prop. Meaning for so many years, it was those of us that were candidates were struggling to try to sell ourselves to the employer. The roles have really flipped, and now the employer is trying to say, okay, I want to get my name out, and then I want to really attract that talent. So what do I do? I think the first thing is to communicate, in an authentic way, what you stand for. I think employees are really looking for something authentic. So organizations that are not merely, as they may have been 30 years ago, in it for shareholder value or profit, that today that the organization has a set of core values that they actually believe in and walk the talk. They're clear about their mission and their vision, and that ideally that has some greater purpose beyond profit, whether it be a people-oriented mission or a planet. We call it the triple P, so to speak. So I think starting there, and then also as you're meeting with candidates, really co-authoring that idea of showing that you're flexible, that it's not about how long you're in the office, it's not about FaceTime, that you are empathetic, you're compassionate, and that you care about the individual first and foremost. There was a quote I heard last week that I thought was so powerful that I'll kind of wrap my answer on this one. And it was like, for the last 30 years, it was always about, for the employee, they knew that their work mattered. We want the employee to know that they are now matter, right? That it's got to be important that the work matters, but that the employee, the human themselves matter. So I think that's how the employer is going to attract talent.
Yeah, no, that's good. So, but the challenge then, I guess, with this flexibility and even like what Daniel Pink talks about is, how do you measure then how your employees are doing? Because a lot of that measurement was around their physical presence or, overhearing things. So how do we measure, how an employee is doing if we are being so flexible?
I think that's another great question. I think there's a qualitative aspect and a quantitative. I think the qualitative aspect is creating a culture in which managers are regularly checking in on their team members, on a weekly or let's say monthly basis in a real way. Hey, I just wanted to check in and see how you're really doing. And as a manager, what can I be doing to support you? And that's a very real thing, balancing the accountabilities that have to be handled every week, and also recognizing the human being aspects. So I think that checking in is very much the qualitative part. And I think there's as you're listening as a manager, you can tell how somebody's doing. Are they really okay, or are they struggling? I think the quantitative part comes in two factors. One is you can do engagement surveys regularly to see how checked in or checked out are people. You absolutely can then also measure retention rates and attrition. And then I'm a big believer that you can also see it in the numbers. Generally speaking, not always, generally speaking, an engaged workforce is going to be more productive, and that's going to have a bottom line impact to your gross margin or your EBITDA. So I think there's a mix of qualitative and quantitative you can look at.
Yeah. So it's almost, it's an inherent, I guess, assumption that people show up because they actually want to work. And so therefore, if they're engaged, they're going to be creating output.
Absolutely. And the last thing I would say is one of the hows to that, aside from the measurement, is empowerment. One of the biggest obstacles I see is organizations that will give lip service to employees or team members being empowered, and yet in that you can see how decisions are actually made, and it tends to be just a few from the top. I think one of the best ways to engage your employees and keep them around is not just listen, but show that you're listening by giving them the empowerment and decision making that they crave. And when employees feel like they're actually part of crafting a solution, you're going to see them sticking around a lot longer.
Okay. I want to talk about, obviously something's very specific to now is this vaccine mandate that some people are putting, and you're seeing like rumors that Southwest has been, that's the reason they're canceling their flights is it's rumored that there's been, employees who are protesting and not coming to work. And I find it to be a very complicated decision because, these companies are private, so they can decide what kind of work environment they want to create. On the other hand, it's also a very personal decision.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also a decision that could impact other people. So like, how does a company navigate through this without causing, cataclysmic impact to their organization?
Yeah, great topical, and you're right, very complicated question. I would say an organization, it's funny because I talk to leaders and organizations on this very topic daily, and I think everybody's really struggling on both sides. What I advise both sides, meaning the employee and the organization, is to start with their own values. For example, as an individual employee, where do your values lie in this particular topic, and what shows up for you? And I would say always be true to yourself. The same is true for your organization. What do you value in terms of the health and welfare of your employees, of your customers, et cetera, and what's best for the organization overall? I then think from a pragmatic standpoint, and again, many organizations are already doing this, doing a lot of listening to poll employees to say, if we were to, let's say, have a policy that requires you to be vaccinated or have a negative test weekly, how would you feel about that? Yes, no. It's complicated by the fact that many organizations have employees who travel across borders. For example, I have a client that is struggling because he's being asked to go across into Canada, and there's some very strict, guidelines there. So this is a very real issue. I would also say that in both cases, there's an opportunity rather than I think one of the challenges with the word mandate can be a little bit misconstrued. I think a better choice can be, what are we choosing to do? So if I'm an employee and for whatever reason, what my organizations is choosing to do in terms of a policy I don't like, then I would advocate that individual choose to work somewhere else, right? Because it's not in alignment with their values. Similarly, if the organization says what's best for us is to have some kind of vaccine policy, understand that you may lose some talent, right? So it's not so much of, I guess I view it as less of a mandate and more of an agreement that in order for an individual to want to work for an organization, there's got to be a matching of those values. Where the employee and the organization agree on whatever that approach is, it's a great match. If they don't agree, then there's an opportunity for them to find a way past that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So let's take that now, I guess, a little further. When you're talking about values, companies seem to be getting into more and more social issues.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Ben and Jerry's who's saying that they won't sell ice cream in what do they call it? The Palestine occupied areas.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Is that or you have Chick-fil-A who's always had they've always had their values that they've integrated that for years, but it seems like there's trends where more and more organizations are being more and more vocal about social issues when they used to just be a place, I think, to make product and service needs. What is that? Is that healthy for the organizations, do you think? Because you attract then a bunch of people who align to your values and you create a strong culture, or is it very alienating, or is it depends, the favorite college answer?
Well, no, I won't give you that answer. I would say I'm going to use a strategic answer from my strategy background, which is it's all about strategic choices. And so both of what you said can be true at the same time, meaning the first thing is have the organization say, what do we stand for? And do we stand for something? I mean, a lot of organizations, let's be honest, I think are having a reckoning because they really haven't been clear to themselves about what they do and do not stand for. And that can be challenging when you're trying to retain talent, or if you're going through some industries disruption. So the first thing is to get really clear on what you stand for and what you don't. The second thing is you start to kind of follow the breadcrumbs about what your strategic initiatives are going to be, what your budget choices are going to be. You then have to understand what the trade-offs are going to be if you do make a particular stand. Chick-fil-A, or pick your organization, we've all experienced that they had some trade-offs when they made those kind of strategic choices known. So you're going to attract some folks, and then you're going to get some PR hits on some others. So it's not about good, bad in my mind. It's about are you aware of the impact and how do you feel about that impact, right? Mm-hmm. From a profitability standpoint, from a attraction and retention standpoint. A lot of organizations think through that very proactively and say, and we are okay with the following outcomes, right? One of the things an example I really love to quote is Kind Bars. Kind Bars is an organization, many of you know, that was very like early adopter on kind of a lot of these values. And it didn't sit well with everybody. And yet they were very clear on the implications that some of their statements would make in terms of the kind of culture they wanted to create, the employees that they would attract, the employees they would lose, and kind of the competitive response. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. They were very clear on what they were, what they weren't, and the choices that would come from.
Yeah, intentionality, basically.
Yeah.
I had experience with Chick-fil-A as a teenager, as my first, I guess, corporate job. So, I feel like they were kind of like that too. It wasn't hidden what they were, what they believed, and and with them, it was all about being still listening though, and having that customer service focus, and that everybody's welcome, but this is what we as an organization believe. And they've seemed, for the most part, stood by it. And I guess that's what's most disappointing is when organizations take a stand, whatever their stand is, and then they bend to the outcries of the people.
Yeah.
Because then it's like, well, what did you really believe? And is it why, it's obviously hard to stand up to masses amount of criticism, but I think if you do, you probably come out looking more like you have convictions and have more integrity, probably is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, I would say, I think that's where many organizations struggle, is often less about, taking a firm stand and following through. There's certainly consequences from that, but it's usually more about, at least pre-pandemic, so many organizations would have their values posted, on the walls of their organization. And unfortunately, employees would walk around and shake their head because they knew nothing on that poster was accurate, right? They didn't walk the talk. They didn't live that. That's where I see more organizations struggling. And I think because of the pandemic, that a lot of that's shifting. So I think the opportunities for organizations to clarify what they really believe and then walk that talk, and be clear on accepting what that might mean.
Yeah, so it's a good point. And I've worked for quite a few organizations, and like with Chick-fil-A, when 16-year-old, I had to know the vision, the mission. The boss would walk in, and it had a lot to do with the franchise owner, right? But he would walk in and he would be like, "All right, what's the mission?" And you get grilled on it. And he truly tried to believe it. Or live it, I should say. And then I've worked with organizations where, I think you mentioned this before, it's like, what is the vision? Or I don't know what we're doing here.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've been working on with my organization, is kind of creating this one pager of like, at a glance, who are we? Everything from vision and mission all the way down to what we value and things like that. But how do you incorporate that in your perspective in a real way, in a meaningful way, that's not just some trite, memorization exercise or posting it on the wall exercise or, something like that?
Yeah. So I think the answer is, rather than top down, which is where a lot of organizations have done it for decades, is bottom up. And what that looks like practically, is, I don't care if you're an organization of one person, two persons, or 2 million, having the employees help craft and articulate those, right? The best way to really kind of have something that people want to support is have them be part of it. So rather than telling people what the values should be or theoretically are, having workshops, even if it's around lunchtime, and say, what do we think and what do we want our values to be? And then getting to the next level. I call it like the foundation of a house. You start with the values, which are the foundation of the house, having people speak of what they think they actually are, the people living and breathing the organization every day. Then you put the next layer on, which is the mission. Why do we exist? What's our purpose? Whom do we serve? And again, have the people on the ground actually articulate that in their own words. And then finally say, what does success look like in 3 years and 5 years? What kind of impact do we want? And again, have them, the employees themselves, articulate that. The more that you can have the employees themselves crafting that and then owning some of the strategic initiatives, and how things are executed, the much more it's going to be lived on a daily basis.
You know, I think I agree with you for the most point, and it's very congruent with everything I've learned about, gaining buy-in and really making people feel valued. But as you're talking, I'm sitting here thinking, well, I wonder, Walt Disney probably didn't do that, or Steve Jobs probably didn't do it. These people who create, that were so like such visionaries. I don't imagine that they gave up a lot of control in that area. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. Steve Jobs is a great example, right? And I would say that model can work and does work. The Elon Musk model can work. I would say as an organization, you need to be very self-aware of where you fall on that spectrum. Are you part of an organization with a Steve Jobs or an Elon Musk? If you are, be aware of kind of where that may lead you. So again, using strategic choice thinking in the Steve Jobs model, brilliant, 99% of the right, usually correct in terms of what he predicted, right? There was also a fairly significant human impact to the way decisions were made that we've all read about, not necessarily a warm, comforting place to work.
Right.
How do you feel about that? How much do you want to come to work? Are you okay with that? Right. On the other hand, if you're not a Steve Jobs kind of environment, the question is, how do you want it? How do you want that to look and feel? So I would say, without putting any judgment, just be very self-aware of where you are on that spectrum.
Yeah, and I guess you attract then the people who are comfortable in that environment, and it goes back to your choice down to the individual, right? I can choose to go work for a Google where it's really intense, or I can choose to not work at some place that's so intense, and that's my choice. Part of the reason I never wanted to work for the Big Four when it comes to consulting is I didn't believe in the grueling hours. Like, I didn't believe you have to work that much to do a good job. So you would never find me in Accenture or PwC or something. I valued that somewhat of a work-life balance. I mean, I work hard, but I want it to be on my terms.
Exactly. And yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was
Go.
just going to cite Amazon as another example. And again, in full disclosure, I've never worked for Amazon, but I know that there have been quite a number of reports about the fact that, again, brilliant organization, massive global impact, and at periods of their time, a really difficult place to work if you are not of a certain leadership style, right? So it's a question of kind of what you value, what kind of leadership environment, what kind of culture you're looking for, and how it aligns with your values.
Let's take it down a layer now to your, just your kind of middle manager, your team lead, somebody like that, right? Who is listening, but can't do anything about it.
See, I would the first thing I would say, Jana, is first of all, I hear that a lot. I'm just in middle management. What can I do? They won't let me. I guess I would challenge that thinking. I'm going to use the metaphor of the Matrix real quick, the movie The Matrix that most of us know.
There's a new one coming out.
I know. I can't wait to see it. And I use that reference because I think a lot of us have grown up with a false reality, if you will, that we don't have choice, right? So we think, okay, because I'm a middle manager and I only have so many direct reports, or I don't have any direct reports and I don't have a big title, what can I do? And I would challenge that and say, actually, in my view, we are all leaders, capital L leaders. We all are at choice, and we all have things that we actually, when you think about, can control and influence, right? So we can advocate on behalf of our team. We can advocate to upper management what we believe to be the right thing to do. We can advocate with our feet if we're really at odds with something and leave. So I guess I would challenge anybody that says I can't do anything or they won't let me, and really challenge and say, actually, what can I do? Right? Whether it's something me personally, can I find advocates around me? There's actually a great book by the author Seth Godin, who the book is called Tribes. And he gives all of these examples throughout history of people that had little to no formal authority. Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr. I mean, they started with no followers. And by the time, as the story is written, they have thousands and thousands of followers with huge impact. So I would challenge anybody who says they can't do anything because they're middle management and actually think about, what do I have in my toolkit that I can leverage?
I would imagine that would take courage, not maybe initially, but if you're really not getting, if you're advocating for people and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere, it's going to take a lot of courage to keep pushing the needle, pushing
Huge
the
courage.
icing.
Huge courage and persistence. I think we've all heard the quotes. I mean, for many of us, success is not simply because we're so brilliant. It's the fact that we just refuse to give up, right?
Yeah.
And I think that grit, that determination, that courage, whatever you want to call it, can be for many of us the tipping point between success and not success.
I feel in some of the organizations that I've seen, at least lately, that culturally we are moving to more of a victim mentality, kind of that, well, woe is me, this is happening to me, there's nothing I can do about this. Do you see that? And then how do we combat that?
Yeah. You're speaking to something that a few of us in the leadership space, you probably know this, we call it the drama triangle. And the drama triangle is a mindset that many of us, all of us, will find ourselves in at any time. Sometimes we feel like we're a victim, that something's being done to us. A lot of times we may feel like we're smarter than everybody else, and so we're going to save them, so that's the savior mindset. And the other one is the judge, where they're like, these guys just don't know what they're doing, and we're all victim to that. And the step number one is recognize when you're in one of those mindsets, certainly a victim mindset. Secondly, recognize that from that mindset, there's any number of behaviors and decisions that we're making that have a real impact. And then recognize it's a false choice, right? So recognize that I am a victim is more of a mindset than a reality. Because again, I would challenge anybody to ask yourself there is a lot more under your control than you think. You are empowered and a leader. I don't care if you're a janitor. In fact, I'll give you a quick example. Famous example. It was circa 1969. Somebody walks into the lobby of NASA, and there's a young man sweeping the floor, and it's on the eve of the launch to the moon. And the guy says, "What in the world are you doing here on the eve of the launch to the moon, sweeping this floor?" And the guy says, "I'm helping that ship get to the moon." Right. And it's a great example of people feeling empowered regardless of their title. So I would say anybody feeling like a victim, I would say be aware that that's a bit of a narrative that you might be telling yourself, that you have a lot more empowerment than you may think.
I haven't heard about the drama triangle. So when you have the savior and the judge, then obviously there's probably good elements, but also bad elements. So what is the ultimate objective of understanding this triangle then?
Being self-aware that you've got this narrative. Secondly, being what I would say proactive in your choice, not reactive. The problem with the drama triangle we all find ourselves, Jana, is that we become feeling like things are outside of our control. So we throw up our hands. It's always somebody else's problem, right? So the idea is to get to a place of self-empowerment and intentionality, where I recognize, okay, there's actually something I can do and I will do, and I can affect this, even if it's how I choose to think about the scenario, right? So the ultimate outcome is intentionality and impact that you want to have as a leader.
And then how do I help my teams if I have this knowledge? How do I then help them through this?
Great question. Number one is I think transition from maybe what a lot of us were trained to do as managers, from telling or being prescriptive to being more of a coach. And what I mean by that is a coach, rather than saying, I think you should go do this, team, you can be more of a coach and saying, what do you need to be successful? What does success look like? And then mirroring back some of the things that you think might be getting in their way from that. And so going back to the drama triangle, you can say, I'm noticing, let's say you're talking to one of your direct reports, I'm noticing that you keep saying that they won't let you, right? Or I'm noticing that you keep complaining about so-and-so. What would it look like if you actually took some initiative here, right? And kind of shifting from that prescriptive to more of a coaching approach.
Yeah. We use a lot of Agile in our organization, and that's a big thing. It's about being they talk about the Agile coach. And, for somebody like me, it's actually, it takes a lot of, I guess, intentionality and thought to do it, because I am more of I see the answer. So let me just tell you what the answer is. More of the consultant, right? Like,
Yeah.
let me show you there, and I'll drag you along there, versus guiding somebody to that answer, which could take a lot more time, but is more meaningful.
Yes, and recognizing that as leaders, we may need different tools at different times. There are absolutely times, perhaps in a crisis, when we just need to jump in and tell people, we need you to go over there to plug that hole, right? And then there are other times when we recognize that maybe more of a coaching or mentoring approach would be more useful. It will take longer, and it will have maybe a longer term impact as well.
Right. I wanted to get your thoughts on, there was the study out of, I can't remember if it was Sweden but one of the Norwegian countries, about the 4-day work week. And then I think it was Marcus Buckingham came out and said, yeah, well, they tried this way back in the industrial era, where they changed it from a 40-hour week to a 50-hour week, or they turned off. No, it was they made the environment brighter, and then they made the environment darker and measured the productivity. And in both instances, productivity went up. And the reason is when people are observed, and this goes back to a little bit what you're talking about, when people are observed, they feel valued. And when they feel valued, their productivity goes up. So what's your reaction to that, and kind of tying that, I guess, to listening?
I think organizations have an opportunity more than ever to get creative on what matters. I think sometimes organizations have presumed, and I'll give you some great examples, presume what they believe employees want. Typical example that I hear a lot. In fact, last week I had an example where somebody said, well, don't they just want more money? And I kind of smiled and I said, well, not necessarily. Have you asked them? And he's like, no, I just assume they all want more money. Don't presume that what you think is going to be incentivizing for an employee is what they actually want. In some cases, money may be important. As we say in philosophy, it may be necessary, but it's not sufficient. There may be things like when they're able to come in and leave work. Pre-pandemic, there was this thing called a commute. And a lot of folks, in terms of when they started their commute and when they went home, was a big, big deal, right? Being able to, work around childcare things, healthcare benefits, all of these things can, although maybe small to the employer, can be absolutely huge to the employee. So as part of that listening is really open up your scope about the numbers of things you're asking for beyond maybe compensation, beyond maybe the traditional things around medical benefits, and really getting creative. And by asking the employee, what would, if you could have anything, what would that look like? And sometimes they'll ask for something like free Wi-Fi or something that would just blow your mind. And it's like, is that all you needed? But they can really add up to the employee.
Well, and I think, though, if you did that, you're going to get diversity in answers, because, like you're saying, different things motivate different people. So, it may be a bonus. It may be free lunches in the cafeteria, although that might be going away post-pandemic. Might be childcare, et cetera. So I guess in order to it's probably about intentionality here again, but do you create a menu of offerings, or do you, focus on one kind of set of people and realizing then, well, that's the type of people I'm going to attract? Like, how does a company decide, with their limited funds, what choices to make?
Yeah, so you're right. It's gonna translate to choices ultimately. So as I back into that answer, I would start with a lot of listening. So I would, and I'll use a medium-sized organization as an example. What a lot of organizations of that size are doing, first of all, they're doing a lot of town halls and listening, where they get, I don't know, let's say 25 to 30 employees in a room at the same time, even virtually. And they ask a number of questions that would probe, let's say, 10 to 12 to maybe 15 areas of what those things might be: compensation to work-life schedule to childcare, all of those things. And they get that qualitative feedback. You can follow that up with quantitative surveys as well. You could also measure that depending on the different function or department. So you might, when you get all this data, you would then want to kind of look at the rank orders of somebody in engineering and what that data looks like versus finance versus operations versus marketing. And then to your point, you're going to have to, as an organization, determine what choices you can make. What level of flexibility might you have for different departments, if at all? Maybe you don't. Maybe it has to be a one size fits all. And then you're gonna have some hard choices to identify a suite of options that serves the majority, and recognizing by definition you're going to have some folks that may leave as a result, and that's okay as long as there's transparency along the way.
Yeah, and I think it's about how you engage with those people. I had not quite the same, but a person who their skill set. They've been great as an employee of our organization, but their skill set doesn't align long term. And so, said, I think you probably feel this. I feel panicked that I don't have enough work lined up for you because it's a little outside of our wheelhouse. How can I help you find something? I'm not going to tell you to leave. Like, I'm not going to make you leave, but how do we approach this so that you find something that's more meaningful to you? So it's hard to, like, you don't always have the flexibility to draw that out for a long time. But, I think it's important that you do whatever's in your power to help those people transition.
I love that. Jenna, I'm so glad you mentioned that. One of the things that I think the best organizations do, even if it's in a transition situation like that, where maybe an individual's identified that they've self-identified that it's not a good fit, or the organization's identified it's not a good fit due to whatever reasons, that rather than it being a layoff or a termination, it's like, hey, how can we support you finding the job of your dreams? All the way down to, hey, we've got a bunch of connections amongst the senior leadership team. We know a lot of folks would love to, reach out on your behalf, right? In a very pragmatic way, so that we can support you in being the best version of you in that next chapter. Like, organizations that do that, I think, are just amazing.
Yeah, no. And I think you create goodwill, and then you're not ruining your reputation. That person's not out there feeling angry and posting online or something. Well,
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a win-win, right?
It really is.
This has been a really great conversation. So, and kind of wrapping up, can you give me, like, your top 3 tips for organizations to not encounter a mortality event when it comes to, I guess, not listening or having a mass exodus of people?
Yeah, thank you, Jana. It's been a tremendous pleasure being here. I would say, listen in the following ways. I would say, first of all, on a kind of a business and strategy side, listen to what's happening within your particular industry. All industries, I think, have gone through a massive transformation and disruption. So notice kind of what's happening there, and identify the kind of business transitions that you might be facing and needing to change. I would then, from there, have a hard look at your mission, vision, values as an organization, and really co-author, is a word I'm going to borrow from somebody I talked to last week, with your employees what you want that to look like in a way that they feel vested, where they feel like they've crafted it in a way that they feel like they're able to execute against it. And then after that's been created, create kind of apply that all the way down to, I would call it kind of regular performance discussions or talent review and career management discussions with your employees. Let's say on a quarterly basis, where the management team or the manager's meeting with that individual employee regularly to say, hey, again, what does success look like for you on your journey, and how can we support you on that? The more of that's done, I think the longer that they'll be able to engage and retain employees.
Great points. So, Stephen, it's been a great conversation. If people, you have a podcast, maybe tell us a little bit about that. Tell us how people can stay connected to you and your teachings.
Thank you. Yes. Again, I'm Stephen Kohler with Audira Labs. You can check us out on audiralabs.com. We do have a monthly VCast and podcast series called Listening Sessions, in which we interview leaders of all types about their leadership lessons, and we try to walk the talk by listening to their experiences, as you're kindly doing today. And check us out. We're also on all the social media platforms too.
Great. Thanks so much for being here. And to our audience, thanks for listening. And until next time, keep your organizations healthy.